What's up? Andrew Kramer here for VideoCopilot.net, and welcome back to another very exciting tutorial. Today, I'm going to show you how to create your own airliner with JetStrike. Now, JetStrike is our new model pack that includes a bunch of customizable jets. They're fully riggable, and they have, animated landing gear and canopies and wings and flaps. And of course, you can customize them however you want. So today, we're going to take a look at this airliner and how you can customize it to create your own. Now, American Airlines, unfortunately, went out of business because of just substantial amount of debt, and, well, a lot of people died too. And most of it was sold off to Air Copilot. So let's go ahead and get started. Here's what we're going to be creating. We've got this nice aerial shot of this jet flying. And what's cool about this is that if I create a new viewer here and double click on the texture, you can see that it's fully customizable. Let's say we want it to be a low budget airliner. Well, we could come in here and there you have it. Now, if this is Sam Loya Airlines, we might take some of this concrete texture. We could put a few patches on the airline, or we could change the transfer mode to multiply and maybe just give it a little more grunge. That seems a little bit more befitting. And just like that, we can customize how this airliner looks. All right, I'm just kidding there, Sam, if you're watching this. And if you're not, well, I think we know the truth. All right, let's go and create a new composition and get started. We'll come over here, create a new comp. We'll make it 720p and 10 seconds long and hit OK. We'll create a new solid and we'll hit OK. And then we're going to come over here to the effects and we'll type in element and take element, drop it onto that solid. Then what I want to do is come over here to the scene setup and we're going to load in one of these jet models. So the JetStrike pack is going to show up as a blue folder and we have a bunch of different options. We could do Air Force One, of course, got a bunch of nice jets as well. And if you didn't know, all of the jets are fully rigged. If we preview the rig controls here, you can see that everything animates. Now, on the After Effects side, you can animate all these things individually. This is just a rig preview here. So let's just keep going here. Also, we've got the ground assault vehicle, fully rigged, all the flaps, landing gear. This is a really cool model. Now, let's not get distracted. So let's come down here and let's load in this jumbo jet. Here's the jet that I want to use for this particular scene. Also, you can see the rig controls work for this jet as well. Now, first thing we'll do is set up a reflection map. So right now, if we go in the environment, we're just using the default. Now, since we're going to be flying in the clouds, I actually created our own custom reflection map. So we'll take this, drop it into that slot, and now we've loaded it as a reflection map. So we could see it reflecting here. Now, we can also adjust the material. If we click on the body, we can play around with some of the settings for that material. If we scroll down here, we can do things like turn up the specular amount, which is the highlight here. We can also increase the reflectivity, so that'll change there. Now, some shaders have a reflection map, and the reflection map helps to block out the reflection for areas that you don't want to have reflectivity. And basically, you can go in there and play around with the gamma if you want to have more or less reflectivity. This is looking pretty good for now, and we can always jump in here and make any refinements. Let's go and hit OK. And there's our jet. Now, I'm going to create a new camera. Now, we want to go ahead and use the 80mm preset and hit OK. Let's go and name our layer here. So we'll just call this jet, and we'll jump into the project. And I've got this aerial background image, so it's pretty high resolution. You can download these backgrounds in the resources for the JetStrike pack. So I'm going to drop this into our background. And there we've got some nice skies. And now we have this nice aerial background. Let's hit F4, make it a 3D layer. And then I'm going to take it and push it back in Z space. So we want to just shove it really, really far away, and then scale it up a bit. Then we'll take the camera tool here and let's move it around here, get a little closer. And again, we can play around with our background and shift it into position. Now I want to zoom in a lot more. So I'm going to take my camera, hit AA, and this brings up the camera options. And I want to zoom this in maybe to about 4,500. Nice long lens. What this represents is if we were in another aircraft and I was zooming in with my camera lens to be able to see this. And it's important to use a long lens rather than a wide lens to make things look really large and substantial. So just keep in mind, if you were really creating this shot in real life, how would you be able to do it? And then how can you simulate that in After Effects? We've got our background. Maybe we'll scale it down a bit here. And let's just move this into place. And again, we'll take our camera tool. If we hold the right click down and zoom in, we'll actually push the camera closer to the jet. This looks pretty good. Maybe zoom the background in just a touch more. All right, so our shot looks good, but now we need to adjust our lighting. So we'll come over here, create a new light, and let's add a parallel light that is mostly white, maybe a little bit of warmth, kind of to match the color, and hit OK. And we'll set the intensity to about 150 and hit OK. Now, currently the light is affecting the background, so let's fix that. We'll hit AA, and on the background, let's turn on Accept Lights to off. And then we'll take our light and let's try to move it into position to match the way the background looks. So you can see the clouds are being illuminated from the right side. So let's take this parallel light, hit P, and we can move this around a bit. So if you hold down Shift, you can actually move it a little bit faster just by dragging the values. So we'll just make some tweaks here. And maybe turn the intensity up a bit. That looks pretty good. And I also want to create an ambient light. So we'll create another light, ambient, and this time we're going to make it more of a blue color to match sort of that ambient light of the clouds and of the sky. And we'll set the intensity down to about 50, and we'll hit OK. With this blue light, now we can kind of see just the basic sense of the shot. So this is starting to look pretty good. Now, one thing I notice is that I'd like my aircraft to be a little more reflective. So I can go back into the material and edit it, or I can also go down to the output for Element 3D and play with the multi-pass mixer. So what's nice about this is that we can tweak the value while looking at our composite. So here, just cranking up this reflectivity amount, and you can see it makes a big difference and looks a lot more crisp as it's flying here. This is looking pretty good. We could play around with our light position, a little bit more. I think that looks pretty nice. And we could even add another light. So I could take this light, duplicate it, Control D, and hit P, and then move it around actually to create a highlight. And even though this isn't exactly realistic because there's only one sun, it's nice to be able to just model the light to create, some nice highlights. And you can just see the difference here. We're not making a big difference, but just making it pop out a little bit more in this particular shot. All right, I'm also going to take our background, move it down just a touch here, and let's start animating the camera. So we'll take our camera and we'll hit P and we'll hit A, hold down Shift and hit A, and we can keyframe the point of interest and the position. Then move forward a few seconds, and then we can simply orbit around the scene, maybe push in a touch. Maybe we'll take it and we'll back it away like this, and maybe we'll make it look a little bit higher, and the animation will be us sort of coming down closer to get a nice shot. Okay, so as we move the camera, we also want to take our background and reposition it so that it fills in nicely. So we can see some nice specularity on the wings, and overall it just looks like a nice shot. But in order to make it look more realistic, like we're floating, what we can do is add an expression to the point of interest. So the point of interest is where the camera is pointing. So if you imagine shooting inside of an airplane, it might be kind of hard to hold the camera steady. Giving a little bit of randomness to the point of interest will just give it a little bit of a searching feel. So let's hold down Alt, click on the stopwatch, and we're going to type an expression. We're going to type wiggle 0.5, 50 and parentheses, so that every half a second we're going to randomly move about 50 pixels. So we can tweak those values, and maybe that's a little high. Let's try like 40. And now if we preview this, we can see a nice kind of floating vibe going on. And maybe we don't start so far away. We could just kind of bring it down a little closer. And depending on how sporadic we want this to be, we can lower the time or lower the amount. So that looks pretty nice. The other thing I might do now at this point is add some color corrections. Let's come over here, make a new adjustment layer, and let's add a curves adjustment. And I might brighten this scene up just a touch. And the other thing I want to do is add a little bit of a glow. So we'll choose Effect, Stylize, Glow. We'll set it to Screen, and maybe increase the threshold here. Turn up the size, the radius, and then really turn the intensity down. Like, we want this to be a very, very subtle glow, just to kind of soften the CG of the shot and make it not so crisp and hard looking. Now, the other thing I might want to do is add a little bit of glow to some of these lights. And we could do that with Element. So if we scroll down to the render settings, we could go to the glow, turn the glow on, and there you can see those little lights are going to glow for us. Now, if we want to animate the jet, there's a couple of ways I recommend that. So what I would do is create a group null, and that'll create a null, and we can hit return and type jet. That allows you to animate the jet right inside the comp. So we could do things like rotate it, have it bank. I don't know how much craziness this jet's going to be able to do, but that's just an easy way to be able to animate it. And then you can also see the aircraft rig settings. Now, it may be hard to see, but you can actually animate the turbines. You can also animate the flaps. So if we play around with the flaps here, you can see those animate. And there's also things like the landing gear, of course, that you can animate. So what's cool is that you have access to all of those rig controls while you're animating. Okay, so now let's talk about customizing the texture. If we go inside the scene setup, what we could do is click on the body. And here we can see the diffuse texture is diffuse 1B. Now, in order to locate this, you can right click on it and show in Finder or show in Explorer. And here we have that file. So let's go ahead and hit OK and OK. And what I'll do is I'll import this texture into our project. Then we'll take it, bring it out into the comp, then shut the eye off for that layer, and then pre-compose it. So layer, pre-compose at the very bottom there. And we'll leave all the attributes and we'll hit OK. Then on our jet layer with Element, let's go down to the custom layer and select the custom texture map for that Air Force One diffuse texture. This way, it's loaded inside of Element and we can use it as a map. So then we'll go into the scene setup, click on the diffuse texture, and instead of using that JPEG image, click on this drop down and we can click on one of our custom layers. So we'll click on custom layer 1. Everything looks the same. We'll hit OK and we'll hit OK. Now the difference is the map is now editable as a comp. So let's create a new viewer, double click on that map, and here we have access to the entire UV map. Now we can open this up in Photoshop, do the same thing, but what's cool is that we could do it dynamically inside of After Effects. So if we take the text tool, click in here, type in, Video Copilot, scale it up, you can actually see it updates on the side here. So we can move it around, maybe place it right there. And here we've got Video Copilot Airlines. Now you can compensate for the stretch factor by just squeezing it down a touch. One thing you might notice as well is if you go to the opposite side if we want to put a texture on the other side, we just have to take our logo, duplicate it, Control D, and when we put it over here, we just need to flip it. So we can right click, flip horizontally, and that way it reads correctly. Okay, so we'll go ahead and close that. This is a great way to customize your textures, and you can do a lot of different things with this. You could add different logos or emblems. You could even add things like damage and grime or fire burns, like if there was a fire and we want to see some burn marks. Now, if you are using a static texture, like you're just changing the skin, you probably should take your comp after you're happy with it and render out a frame. So you could do something like save frame as, set it to best quality, and save it as a PNG or a JPEG file. And just make sure you give it a different name and just call it, VC map. When you save it, and then simply take that texture and load it in to the diffuse texture slot. And the reason you want to do it that way is that with Element, if you load it in directly, it only loads the map one time. But if you use a comp, it's actually going to load the map for every frame. So it might feel a little bit slower to render than if you just use a single image. But as you can see here, it's quite fast. Just as you orbit the camera around, it might just feel a little slower than a single map. All right, so this is looking pretty good. I could probably give you a few more tips and tricks. Maybe you want to have a little bit of atmosphere kind of floating by in the scene. And what you could do is add a particle layer. So we could call this particles. You can use CC particle world. I'm going to go ahead and just use particular, and we'll take particular, drop it out here. And what we want to do is go into the emitter, set it to a box, and make it fairly large here. And we'll set the direction to directional. And so we can see the particles are just kind of floating out, and we'll increase the velocity here. And so now they're floating away from the camera. So let's move the position forward past the camera out here. And so now we just have a bunch of floating particles. And what this will do is just give us kind of that Christmas vibe that we're looking for. No, let's see. We'll come down here to the particle life. Let's turn up the life. Let's turn up the size of these particles and lower the opacity. And then if we offset the layer, and we can see it a little bit better. So let me just put it below our color correction. And I might just turn up the opacity a little higher so you can see what it's doing. Maybe size randomness up a bit. So this is the idea. You just want to have some floating air, some clouds, atmosphere, that kind of a thing. But you really want it to be quite subtle. So lower the opacity down so that it doesn't seem so intense, maybe even like 2. And that just gives it a nice bit of motion. So that is looking pretty good. All right, well, thank you guys for watching. My name is Andrew Kramer, and please check out the website, and of course, check out JetStrike. I think you guys will be amazed of how much work we put into it and all of the different things you could do with it. My name is Andrew Kramer, and we'll see you next time.